How you doing? Excellent, excellent. Great to hear. Thank you for coming out. I'm your moderator, Dr. Eric Wesselman, psychologist and full-time nerd. I love having nerdy conversations. Today, we have our panel, the Yu-Gi-Oh! Reunion with Eric Stewart and Dan Green. So please help me welcome our guests.
What is going on, peeps?
So, Eric,
well, I guess I'll be in the center.
Oh,
As much as I hate all the attention.
So both these folks here with me are esteemed voice actors who have worked on lots of properties, of course, Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon being two of the bigger ones. We're just going to start out with a couple warm-up questions and then I'll turn it out to you. So first and foremost, what got you both into voice acting?
So I start as a classically trained actor. I got a degree in acting from Rutgers-based Pro School of the Arts. And one of the guys I was in school with later was in a position to be directing some anime. And so he said, hey, I got some background voices. You don't have to audition for it. There's like demons and stuff. I'm like, oh, cool. But I saw some of the video and I was like, oh, this isn't the best animated thing ever. So I said, you know, that's okay. He said, but it pays $50 an hour. And I said, I'll be right there. That was back in the 90s, so that's like $80 or something anyway. So, and as the story goes, that was being done by the same studio who was doing Pokemon. And they were editing some stuff, and as I was told, I think a producer overheard my voice being edited in that studio and said, hey, why don't we bring this guy in for an audition and see what happens? And it just sort of snowballed from there.
Excellent, thank you.
so my path is a little different. We both ended up in the same area, but so my journey started as I was a musician first, and I worked at a tennis club teaching tennis. And one of the members there owned a recording studio. And they said to me, we're looking for a new assistant at our recording studio. And I'm thinking, this is exactly what I want to be doing, right? I'm going to work in a recording studio. So at 18, I took this job, and I consider it sort of the wax on, wax off approach to getting a job, right? I cleaned the coffee table.
That's a Karate Kid reference.
Right, I made coffee, I took the trash out, I did all of these things like as an office manager kind of thing, as an assistant. And I was like, hey, and when are the bands gonna start coming in? And my boss was like, well, we do like a little bit of jingles, but we mostly do radio and TV voiceovers. We do casting and production. And of course, you would think I would have asked all of those questions before I took the job, but I just heard recording studio and I was like, hire me, yay. But I started there at that very low level and worked my way up from production assistant to assistant casting director to in-house producer to then running the studio for 10 years. So I did a lot of behind the scenes stuff while I was still pursuing music. So when the opportunity came along for me to go on the road, for those of you who only know me for the voiceover world, my music resume, I have to drop some names because I feel like it's on the same level as my crazy anime world. I toured with Ringo Starr and the All-Star Band as a solo acoustic opening act. Leonard Skinner, Peter Frampton, who produced my first album. So I toured with a lot of big rock acts. So this is really what I was trying to do. And when I got the opportunity to go out on the road with Ringo, I thought, what could I do, because I wasn't going to get paid because I was an opening act, what could I do to make money from anywhere? And I thought, well, since I've been experiencing all of this voiceover stuff, and I've done a couple of commercials here and there, this makes more sense. And I also could be doing the voice of, Tidy Bowl as an unknown, you wouldn't see my face doing voices, and then be on stage singing Oh So Sensitive love songs, right? You wouldn't be like, hey, it's a Tidy Bowl man singing that song. So it just made sense. And now, after 35 years of being a voice actor, I really don't know what else I would do. So audio is my world. And I sort of fell into that business. But I directed a lot of shows as well as acted in them. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, both of you kind of started voiceovering anime, when it was moving from the fringes to and you've seen it for the mainstream. So he started back in the mid '80s. I'm of an age when I remember watching, the $20 VHSs of the dubbed. You had to extra $20 if you wanted the subtitle ones.
You'd find them in Blockbuster on that one shelf in the back.
Exactly. So what has it been like to see the evolution of anime in this country?
That's a really good question, and I think Eric's response is going to be a fuller one. But to have an affection for a certain form of storytelling, as I admire your X-Men T-shirt. A sort of a similar thing has happened with comic books becoming more mainstream. With mostly because of the movies being so great. Those movies couldn't have been made before they were, because visually it just wouldn't have looked as good. But anyway, to have something that's more niche become something more mainstream, I think is both sort of affirming, because you like it, and then all of a sudden, well, see, everyone likes it because it's a wonderful thing, and that's great. But I also, and this comes more for me from the comic book perspective, because I'm a big comic book geek myself, but I also feel like, oh, but wait, you don't really want to understand what it is to love something when nobody else does, and being able to fly your freak flag or whatever. But I mean, obviously, the more people who are part of the community, the better. And I often say, well, how many people have been to a convention before? Right? Okay. Is there anybody here? This is their first time at a convention? Okay. Welcome to the world of conventions. So you will find that each convention has its own little particular focus or flavor to it, that's true. But what's almost universal about all of them is that people are there to have a good time, and they're being open and friendly, accepting. It's nice to see, it's nice to be a part of. So the community is great, and the larger it gets, I guess, the better.
Yeah, so I mean, being part of two, obviously sort of legacy shows, with Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh, is definitely humbling. It's for all of the things that we've worked on, where people are like, it's going to be the biggest thing, whatever, and usually it's not. That's just to get us to do them. But with Pokemon, because I also was working behind the scenes as well, understanding the full machine that goes into that. We're all fans of something, and as Dan said, and sometimes we want it to be exactly the way it is in the comic books, or I can't believe they changed this for they changed this, or they edited this out.
What if 4 kids ruin the show?
Right, but and that's exactly what I was going to get to, is that, so working behind the scenes, a lot of cultures have different rules of what they can air for children. And in order to get things on the air, the production company had nothing to do with all of those changes. What that was is the network, is a division called the BS&P, Broadcast Standards and Practices. And each network has their own people that do that. There is no real set of rules. It's whatever that person has decided is going to be offensive to the advertisers that they want to advertise during these shows. And then, of course, Saturday morning cartoons have certain rules in this country about what you can show in terms of the violence factor, stuff like that. So, in defense of those edits, turning Pokemon into a worldwide, universally accepted anime made all of these countries feel like it was their show, and exposed more people to anime than could ever be done before. And those edits, those changes, so that France played those versions of it, Germany played it, and they played all of these all around the world. Each country had their Pokemon. It made it universal, which helps our community. More conventions, people feeling that they could reach out and find people that are just like they are. I'm a gamer geek, that's my fandom. So the creativity, the diversity, the way that we are together in this kind of community is, to me, what the template of how we should behave outside of conventions. But it wouldn't be at the same numbers if it was only in the back of Blockbuster on that shelf. So you can complain about the edits, and I get it, but you can also thank 4Kids for making anime conventions, because of the success of Pokemon, a much more universal thing. I bet you a 6-year-old and a 60-year-old knows what Pokemon is. and they don't know what every anime in the world is that you love is because of the universal appeal of it.
As a psychologist, are you concerned that Eric has twice referred to that shelf at the back of the video store?
Absolutely not.
Yes.
So what I want to do now is I want to give your fans a chance to ask you some questions here. So I'm going to hop off the stage and hopefully not break my ankle and wander around with a mic.
Yeah, whatever floats your boat, man. Go wander around. Good luck, right if you get work. He's really good.
You've been in shows about people on journeys.
That's right.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I'll just stay here then. So, I'm sure this is going to come up, so I'll just get it out of the way in the first place. So, do you have any opinions on the Yu-Gi-Oh! Abridged parody series, notably their interpretations of your performances specifically?
So, we're friends. We know Martin. We've appeared with him before. He's a good guy. He's a very funny guy, very talented guy. The issue is the legality of it. So just to explain this another side of it, parody, you can do a parody of something. No problem. No copyright infringement. You can do a parody. But the minute you monetize it, then it becomes an issue. Martin's issue and the Konami has a problem with Martin, is Little Karibo, is because he uses the original art and sells merchandise. If he didn't do that, then it would be accepted by them. We still work with Konami. So I respect his ability, but I also see the creativity that's there. I think what he could do is probably something original, because he's got the talent to do that. But I don't mind him poking fun at the characters. That's all great. It's really just the legality of the copyright stuff. Dan agrees with me.
Yeah, pretty much. But also to back it up, I mean, I do respect his creativity. We go back and forth a little bit on social media. I put up something and somebody responded with, "Oh, you should do some ASMR." Do people know what ASMR is? Right. And then Martin Little Karibo said, I asked people, what would you want me to do? And his response was, could you say encouraging things to me after I lose a duel? And it took me about a month or so to do, but I did, because, so I personally, no issues. It's just the complication of that.
What is probably the weirdest voiceover work that you've done in your career?
Weird is a big category. What would you consider weird?
Are you talking about content or just the experience?
We were content. Interesting. So anime provides a lot of different, things that in animation that they wouldn't do in the United States. In the United States, it's like cartoons are just for kids, and if you're going to be a movie, there has to be songs for kids. Whereas in Japan, they're like, no, this is just another visual art form. So I'm sure that was meant to happen. They were, but specifically, I think you have to appreciate that. When you've done a lot of these kinds of things, you get sort of inured. You get used to it, right? So it's really hard for something to stand out when you're already like, sure, I'm a creature that only says its name all the time. You don't know what I might be referring to.
No, no. I would say that I directed Ultimate Muscle.
That was weird.
And for those of you who are not familiar with Kinnikuman Ultimate Muscle, one of the things that the developers, the animators liked to do was poll the fans to what type of wrestlers they wanted to see. So when you're asking, 15-year-olds what kind of, wrestler they want to see, let's just say there was pretty much toilet humor. Literally. So two of the characters that we had on that show from fan suggestions were a guy that his head was in a toilet bowl. He was a wrestler with a head in a toilet bowl. And the other one was Monsieur Cheeks, who was an inverted character whose butt was his head, and and he was French though, so that made it acceptable.
Much classier.
But when you say weird, so like I didn't think it was that weird when I was directing it. I'm like, okay, so my friend Chris played that Mr. Cheeks. I was like, so Chris, you're a talking butt. I wanted to have a French accent, and here's your first cue. Let's go. And that was it. We just were going to work. So yes, but there's, I mean, look, if you've worked in cartoons, if you've worked in voiceovers, if you've worked in advertising, you never know what you're going to get, and I mean, nothing surprises me.
Yeah, that's sort of what I was trying to get at.
We just are like, okay, you know.
I will say one of the, not so necessarily so strange for content, but so you guys know Kung Fu Panda, right? And you know Ratatouille, right? Okay, so when a film like that is really popular, you know where this is going. So you know Ratatouille, right? Yeah. So there's knockoff versions, right? They call them mockbusters or something. I don't know what. But so you will notice that I am, as is Veronica Taylor and other well-known 4Kids actors, probably Mike Pollock and Wayne Grayson in there somewhere, dubbed some of these mockbusters with a studio called AudioWorks. And so, yeah, I love it when somebody has like one of those to sign, for me to sign. Because, I mean, it's not weird because we know exactly what they're ripping off, but it is so poorly done, you know? And also, these are low-budget things, and so if you feel like the performances aren't as nuanced as you might expect from some of these, you know, actors who have done good work, the reason why is because we're getting crammed through the booth as fast as possible and louder, go! You know, it's okay, here's your check, that's what I came for, bye. Yeah.
Good question.
We can edit.
How has your family responded to your career decision into voice acting? Are they all in support of it?
They're surprised and grateful that I can hold a job and haven't ended up in jail so far. So, yeah. No, when I did an Entei in Pokemon 3, I was delighted that I could show that to like my aunt or something. I didn't have to completely explain what a Pokemon was because that movie was like a universal fairy tale. So yeah, that's big. But I'm very lucky to have a family that's as supportive as mine is. Yeah.
My mother still asks me what character I'm going as when I attend conventions, and I just tell her I'm cosplaying as myself because I do have an outfit. But I'll give you an example of the power of Pokemon and how it flowed through my family. So I have two daughters. And when my older daughter was just starting, I think she was probably in the 8th grade, she'd bring over her friends to the house, and I had my studio there with all the toys around my office and, you know, Pokemon stuff, whatever. And it was cool to not think Dad was too cool. So my older daughter would come in and with her friend and be like, and this is my house, whatever, this is my dad's studio. And they'd be like, why does your dad have all this Pokemon stuff? And she'd go, oh, he does the voices for Brock and James. Let's go listen to music in my room, right? And that's what it was. And it was like not a big deal. They kind of thought Dad was cool, but not really cool. Fast forward to college. When that same daughter was in her freshman year, she's trying to make friends in the dorm. And one of the girls, who seems kind of popular, has a room full of people, and they're all hanging out. And she walks in, and she looks up, and she sees that this girl is collecting Pokemon stuff on the shelf in her room. She goes, yeah, you a Pokemon fan? And she's like, yeah. She's like, it's my dad. They're like, what? Yeah, my dad does the voices. And I'm like, you see, now you've learned the power of Pokemon. So yes, very supportive. They still don't understand exactly what I do. My wife has never watched an episode of anything that I've done. She has no idea. When she comes to the convention,
Why they're still married.
Yes, exactly. She says, oh my goodness, look who's here. It's blah, blah, blah. I'm like, you like that show, but you never watched mine? All right, fine. I'll go get his autograph. You know, anyway, but yes, good question.
Did you have any inspirations when you came up with the voices for Kaiba and Yugi? Was there anything that inspired you to get your voice for the character? Anything that influenced your voice?
Yeah, so for both of us, you start obviously understanding what the original is, and sometimes you honor that very closely, and sometimes you take liberties. Obviously, with the example of Yugi and Yami, the Yugi is fairly close to what the original is in the anime. It's supposed to be a young-sounding boy, right? So, but the Yami became very different, and I didn't make that decision. I was just doing what I was asked to do. And so I think it is interesting that in the American version of it, that's when we have the decision to make Yami sound like an older person, right? I completely understand why other people are like, that is the stupidest thing and it's so confusing. He's only an inch taller and why is, it's all like this. And as you listen to the series over the various seasons, Yami was pushed to go a little bit deeper and Yugi's, height was changed depending on who I was working with. Can we get that a little higher? Sure, if you give me a stool. Anyway, so that's and as an actor, you just do what you're told or else you're fired. So.
Yeah, Dan did a great job. I mean, when I was brought in to direct Yu-Gi-Oh, the committee had not figured out exactly what they wanted from him. So it had to filter through me to try to get this, make sense of all of this madness to explain it to the actor. And, jumping through some hoops in the beginning, it's like not high enough, this and this and that. I'm like, okay, we just need to come up with something consistent. And then he'll do it. It'll be great. But we're getting away from the acting and we're just worrying about this register stuff and it's crazy. And it didn't take too long to just finally settle into it. But I've got to commend him for dealing with the madness that we both had to deal with in the booth.
And also, I would add, just to that dynamic too, I think I get a lot of people who tell me how much the relationship of those characters meant, and I think having the older sounding voice does invite the interpretation of a more father to son sort of thing, or avuncular sort of a thing, which is just a different dynamic. I'm not saying it's better or worse. I'm just saying it's unique to that interpretation.
Yeah, and I agree. I think the way that it's played makes sense to me. I mean, because even when those characters appear, the people in the show don't see the difference. They don't hear the difference. We're really only experiencing it from Yugi's perspective. And that's why that makes sense. If that voice in your head sounds different than your normal speaking voice, or it's the spirit of a pharaoh, whatever. We don't see it. We don't even see the physical change, right? But in terms of my choice for Kaiba, so when they hired me to direct Yu-Gi-Oh, everyone had been cast in it already. And they brought me in as a director. And I've been working on other shows. I was still working on Pokemon. So, I don't like to double dip. This is my job as a director. I don't need to go, hey, I should be in the show too. But they couldn't find Kaiba. And if you know the Yu-Gi-Oh series at all, the first episode is all about Kaiba, right? And we're doing all these promos for coming soon to the Kids WB, Yu-Gi-Oh, and I'm like, not if we don't find Kaiba. So as we're going through casting and I'm auditioning most of the male actors that you guys know from all of those shows, the producer just wasn't hearing what he was looking for. And as I got a sense of what he was missing, I finally said we probably were casting for about a month or so, I finally said to the producer, look, I know you don't know me as an actor because you were brought on to direct this show at the same time, produce the show at the same time I was brought on to direct it. But I think I know what you want. We have a deadline. How about I make you a deal? Let me try to dub Kaiba for you, half an episode. Play it for you. If you love it, we're halfway there to getting it on the air. If not, I'll continue casting. But I think I know what you want. And so he says, fine. So I dub it. He comes in and he says, exactly. That's exactly what I wanted. And then he leaves and the engineer turns around to me and it says, you couldn't have done that a month ago so that maybe we get a lunch break? And I was like, well, I didn't want to just double dip. But in terms of the vocal quality, it's not that far from my speaking voice. It's not that far from me. It's only the attitude. I understood that what the director was looking for was that sarcasm, but there's something redeeming about him. And I played him from what I knew. I could ad-lib an episode of Kaiba, but by now especially. because I got it. And it wasn't like, oh my goodness, you're doing this amazing voice, I didn't know it was you. It's like, that's not what I was going for. I was going for the acting and the attitude. So that was my inspiration, was, I think I can play sarcastic.
My question is for the both of you. What is one character, whether if like anything you acted in or anything you produced or whatever, like what is one role in particular that you hold really near and dear to your heart?
Well, we get this kind of question a lot, and I'm assuming you mean from the perspective of how we enjoy doing that from a creative standpoint.
That, but also like when you hear people talk about it, you're like, oh, like it kind of touches you a little bit.
Right, right.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. Hands down, of all the many characters I've portrayed, the ones that I owe the most to, the ones where I had that balance of not only enjoying doing it from the creative standpoint, but seeing how years later, decades later, that was never in my imagination would I be here decades later talking about something that I did, right? That was just not in my thinking. So hands down, that's Yugi and Yami. But that's not to necessarily say those are the only characters that I've loved to portray. But the other reason why those are hands down the most relevant and the ones that I'm the most grateful for is because if I hadn't done that show, I wouldn't have met the woman who became my wife, and I wouldn't have the kids that I have today. So, yeah. My kids are total monsters, but I'm kidding. No, they're wonderful.
Little demons.
So, yeah.
But that's a great question. So, it's always the big three for me. It's always Brock, James, and Kaiba. But I'll tell you the short answer for each one. So, Kaiba to me, because of the rivalry and the complicated, the family value stuff, still with all of the bravado, the shield that he puts up, but yet still cares about his brother and still protective. That touches very close to home for me as someone who's used comedy and stuff like that to be that shield, to not deal with emotions and reality. So Kaiba is a jerk with that. I definitely have been known to be a pain in the whatever and use that. But if you really knew me, I'm a softie, right? But don't test that, right? But what's interesting about Brock and James, because they changed my life on a lot of levels, but I didn't even realize the power of James from Team Rocket until I really started to do conventions. There are so many people that have told me that James helped them come out. And I'm like,
And you weren't really playing it.
no, I truly was playing James as if he was one of the Crane brothers. There was Niles and Fraser and James.
This refers to an old show called Frasier.
Right, because I went to a small private school that was a bunch of hippies, and we played sports against the really obnoxious upper crust school with the khaki pants and the blue blazers. If you go to that kind of a school, that's fine. But I was basically being all of the guys that I played sports against, who spoke like this about Muffy and Buffy and whatever. That's what I was doing. I mean, yes, he's got some fantastic giggles and this and that, and if you want to associate that with whatever, fine. But I didn't realize the power of that, especially with young people watching the show and seeing someone that they related to on that level who was accepted by the group. It was pretty much the star of the show, if we really have to be honest.
I mean, that's what it's about.
But that really meant a lot to me. So I'd have to say that James probably touched me the most because of that.
Hi. What are your guys' favorite Pokemon?
Squirtle.
It's hard. I mean, you know, I'm not the original Mewtwo. Jay Getty did the performance in the first movie, but I was very fortunate to follow in his extremely fine example. And Mewtwo is not, you know, so interesting and complex. Entei, though, I performed first, and that really has a special place in my heart. But it's also hard not to love. Trick or treat. But it's, yeah. But I guess I'd lead with Entei, because that for me was really the entering point. Yeah.
So, in talking with other voice actors, I've heard them say a few stories about how they get into character in the booth. So they think, man, nobody else is here to see me, nobody's going to see what I do in here, so I can just do whatever I want. Some of them say, I voice act with my hand over my head, or I acted out to get into character. Do you guys have any habits in the booth that you...
Well, I keep my nose pointed at the mic, but I'm gesturing all the time. I'm originally from Brooklyn. And so as an ethnic thing, we talk with our hands all the time. So my hands are always, no matter what I'm doing, my hands are moving. I used to wear a lot more jewelry than I do now, and I would jingle in the booth, so I had to stop doing that. But yeah, I mean, I do the funny faces, whatever, but at least keep my nose so that I'm at least on mic. But yeah, you wouldn't want to watch what I do when I'm doing these characters. But yeah, I once made a joke during the first Pokemon movie. They did a behind-the-scenes sort of interview thing that they threw us on as a bonus on the DVD or whatever, or even, yeah, I think it was a DVD, it might have been a VHS. And I said as a joke that I like to dub without my pants on because it made me feel more free, and that the booth window was only this high so that no one saw me from the waist down anyway, so why wear pants? But I said it really like straight, and for a couple of months after that came out, fans at the events would go, so is it true you don't wear pants when you dub? I'm like, if that's what's in your mind when you're listening to Brock and James, fantastic.
I think it's very common for actors to gesture and so forth when they record. But I think something I do that I don't see, because I also occasionally will direct people and whatnot. I very often have one foot forward and another foot back, and it doesn't matter which, and it'll switch up over the session. But between takes, I'm rocking back and forth, because I want to keep the momentum. I mean, literally, you know, not just, you know, to where the energy of the character is. And if it's a scene where the character is still, I'll adjust, you know, but I find that retaining a sense of their physical activity helps to keep me closer to the moment I feel they're experiencing.
And remember, a lot of stage actors and things like that, you know, the physicality is part of the crutch.
Absolutely.
Right? You convince somebody of a performance when you're doing that. So as a voice actor, you don't see that, but we're still doing it. You know, Kaib is always, I'm pointing at things, and, you know, it just, that helps get the emotion out.
Yeah.
If I stood still in the booth, I don't think I would get the same performance at all.
And when I was doing either Yami or Yugi, I would have to get my hair styled, and that took forever. You guys were very patient.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Good question.
So, from doing so many roles of voice acting, has there ever been a day where you're made one mistake of saying you're thinking, for instance, you were Kaiba, James was Brock. Have you ever done a day where you're thinking you were Brock instead of Kaiba or something like that?
You mean accidentally switch characters?
I've never made a mistake.
No,
but I've heard
that's why we get so much work. No, never got confused by that. Plus, also remember with those shows, we dubbed them one at a time, one character at a time, when we were matching lip flap. Not what's a prelay show is recording the voices first and animating later. But for the ADR shows we were doing, I'd go in and record Brock from the beginning to the end, and go back to the top of the show and record James, then go back to the beginning of the show and record the Magikarp salesman. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but there were many mistakes, man, especially getting into card names on Yu-Gi-Oh! How many syllables are in this?
We have a lot of the outtakes saved. There's
some profanity might be here and there.
But the best part about a good outtake is you must maintain the character while you curse. And,
I mean, there for sure are some. I summon the fandom with a bond.
Yeah.
In attack mode.
Exactly. Good question, though.
So as a, extension of you talking about using the physicality in the booth, are there other ways that you guys used your experience in music and classical training and acting in this theater for your voice acting?
I have a minor theory about how people with musical ability are probably better suited to dubbing because they understand innately the rhythm and fitting a performance into that rhythm. You know, it's not enough just to hit the syllables for the right period of time, there has to be a living performance within it, right? And so I'm not saying that everybody who dubs is necessarily going to have musical ability, but I do find it's a very common thing. Would you agree?
Yeah, so two examples I like to use as the connection from, because I'm a singer, it's for the same, why it is the same skill set. So have you ever heard a song for the first time, and by the time it gets to the second chorus, you can sing along to it if the words haven't changed? Because you've memorized the cadence of where the syllables fall. You might not sing all the right notes, but you can sing along with it, okay? That's kind of like dubbing to me. You show me the lip flap one time, I can say, as long as it's written well, I can say that line and that I know where the breaks are because I've memorized the cadence. The other thing is, inflection in speech is pitch, right? Do you want to go to the store? Do you want to go to the store? Do you want to go to the store? Same sentence, different meanings because I changed the pitch on different words. That's the singer's ear. So if I'm directing someone who's musical, and Dan is musical as well, if I'm directing someone who's musical and I say, I need you to go for that word, not this, he understands either I'm going up in pitch or lower in pitch, but I'm going to make a stress change that way. And I've worked with people who have no musical ability whatsoever who don't understand how to make that adjustment because they don't hear it. So that has been very helpful, both with inflection and with timing.
And as an actor, one of the things that I really valued from the training that I got is that they were training you to be artists. And so, and I don't think it's unique to acting, but it's true of acting as well, that you can draw on nearly anything to help you create what you're creating, just by being aware and present in the world you're in.
Good question.
Avoiding those speakers.
That's called feedback, and not good feedback.
Not good feedback.
So out of the thousands of Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh episodes that you guys have voiced over, which is your favorite, like, certain series or episode that you guys have voiced over?
My favorite story arc is when we go back to the Egyptian story arc, because I really wanted to prove that my choice of how I played his rival in modern day made sense. If you go back into the Egyptian story arc, I am not his enemy. I am his sparring partner. And to keep the pharaoh at the top of his game, I can be a sparring partner in ancient Egypt. I can't really be that in modern day high school. So how do you play a character that's not truly his enemy, but is pushing him? And so that fine line, some people are like, Kaiba's a bad guy. He can, no. Because also, who teams up multiple times when there is truly evil? The two of us. So that to me was interesting, to strip away all of the, the way we had to treat it in modern day and be like, oh, that makes sense. So that's what, I like that.
I also have tremendous respect that the entire series has a beginning, middle, and an end. A story shared by all of the characters, and the ones that I portray also influence and help each other grow to become something more than what they were before. And at the end of the series, I thought it was very cool that not only did the story come to a conclusion, but the story concluded in a way that addresses a universal theme of how we will all at some point have to let somebody we care about go. And that, for me, raises it to a level of like, what myths do, right? They help us face things that are an unavoidable part of being a human being. And I think that's great. And I also think that's great, especially for kids. And actually, I'd love to get your input on it. But when I was a kid, there were stories like, Spider-Man and Superman and Star Wars. Each of those examples, the main protagonist's parents are out of the picture in some way, right? And that's just a replication of what happens in ancient myth as well, right? They didn't invent that idea. But for me, that was relatable and meaningful. I lost my father when I was 4. And so having that question of like, who could that person have been in my life? Or what person am I going to become? And then even just, grief itself, which was not just affecting me, but everyone around me, right? I think as I started to age, I felt like that started to get sanitized for kids. Oh, we don't want stories to be upsetting. We don't want stories to be too scary. And I understand the good intention behind that. But kids are already traumatized, just by normal, actual life, So having stories that include darkness or loss or pain is helpful to them. It doesn't hurt them. It helps them deal with the real stuff.
You're on. You're good. We got you.
What's your opinion on season 0 of Yu-Gi-Oh?
I've heard so much about it without having done it. And so many people say, hey, would you be willing to do that? Of course. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. We have nothing but respect for Takahashi's work, and season 0 is a part of that.
Yeah, it would be. I mean, it would be really cool if that had turned into a dub or some other way that we could perform that part of the story. I mean, that also gives you a very, very different perspective on where Kaiba starts off.
Sure.
And also justifies some of his behavior with what he had to deal with. So
yeah. Speaking of hardships,
Oh, he's back up here.
Yeah, so we're getting close to wrapping up here. What I'd like to do here is provide you folks the opportunity to, if there's anything that you want to talk about, or that you can talk about, that you want to plug to people looking for, right? Things to keep out on the horizon.
Eric and I recently recorded something for the new Yu-Gi-Oh show, and it's a scene we get to be in together, and it is completely different from anything you ever heard us do.
No, try it again. Try it again.
He did do. I'm using a different mic now.
Okay.
Yeah, it's completely different, and it's wacky and it's funny. And we got to work with Darren Dunstan, who plays Pegasus, who also directs.
And Ted Lewis.
Yeah, Ted is one of the other characters. We're a gang. The three of us are a gang, and that's all I'm going to tell you.
Yeah. I also did something in honor of the 25th anniversary, but I can't say more than that. So
not our 25th anniversary.
we've actually we have our own company, Andromeda Productions, and we have a podcast that we started 2 years ago. We've been on hiatus for the last several months because I've had other work stuff. I do a lot of audiobook stuff, and that takes a lot of time. I've also been making more appearances with Eric, and which takes time too. And you've had a lot of stuff going on, all good stuff.
Yeah.
But so Andromeda Productions, our podcast is called The Heart of the Cards. It's not about playing the card game. It's a discussion about creativity and inspiration and dealing with what you're dealt. And even though we're on hiatus, we have over 70 episodes up. They're part 1 and part 2, and they're typically about 45 minutes or so. But anyway, we talk about universal things that anybody can relate to. And you don't have to be a quote-unquote artist to have a creative existence. You're creating your existence every day, right? Or you're at least reacting to it, right? Which is a part of it. So, and then we have Crossing the Gods, which is a series that we've been working on for years, and it's been recorded, and we're really happy with what we're going to do with it. But the visual element has been taking me forever because initially we were just going to present it as audio with some sketches. But then I kept refining the visuals and refining them. Oh yeah, Dan, go further that direction. Okay. And so now it's not animated, but there's a lot of visual element to it.
So Dan wrote this story. He hand draws all of the visuals, and he directed it. So I really didn't do anything. And
that's not true.
And it's a great story. It's got the sci-fi stuff in there. It's got the superhero stuff in there. But the real core of it is that all of these characters have their own issues. And to me, the log line for me is you have to save yourself before you can save others. And so they're all trying to deal with those things that don't define them, but are definitely obstacles that they have to get through. So that's kind of cool. And then for plug-in stuff, so I got my brand new album with me. I recorded it over COVID when we couldn't play any shows or do anything. So for those of you not familiar with the Eric Stewart Band, I didn't name it that, by the way. All original rock, pop stuff. I've been a songwriter for a long, long time, longer than I've been a voice actor. But I got my CDs with me this weekend. CD is just sort of a disc that you put into it, right? You can use it as a coaster.
Yeah, they were used at the same time Frasier was out.
Until I can autograph a digital download, I'll be making CDs. You can still listen to me on Spotify. Just buy the CD, have me sign it, and put it up on your wall. But yeah, it's been a great project to work on. I did, for the first time, I did write, record, mix, release one song at a time in the styles of bands that had influenced me. So they're all Eric Stewart songs, but they have vibes of like the Beatles or U2, Brian Ferry, Cat Steve, anything that was an influence of mine as a songwriter. I tried to put on this album. So if you're a fan of original music, then come check that out too. So yeah, that's what we're doing. We try to stay creative. I just want to ask the fans one other question. Sorry to call you fans. I'm a fan too. So how many of you guys like to draw? How many of you guys like to write? How about play music? Voice act, maybe? So what's really cool is you've just shown me the potential of about 5 production companies. So we love the fact that you love what we do. We love what we do. But we also work on other people's projects. That's great. But doing your own thing is also really great. And technology in today's world is so much more accessible. So you are at an event where you are with like-minded people who are creative and probably have passions about the same kind of stuff. So if you're somebody who's got some cool drawings, but you don't know what to do with them, or you're somebody who has a cool story, and you need somebody to put some music behind it or do the voices for it, then you should be talking to each other. Because I find the joy in the next time I see you guys, you showing me something that you created that was yours. And it's not about the money that you're gonna potentially make. It's about enjoying the journey and the process. Do your job for the money, but find that time to do the thing you love for the art. It's really important.
Excellent, thank you for that.
Yeah.
So before we wrap up, where can we find you on social media?
I'm at Dan Green Voices on Instagram and X, or X Twitter.
And I'm an old man, so I'm on X Twitter, it's Eric_Stewart, and I'm also on Facebook. I look like this with a microphone. So yeah, I mean, as long as you're not like an axe murderer, I'll be your friend. You know what I mean? Yes. Yeah.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you very much for spending this time with us, and you'll be at your booth.
Yeah, come see us at the table. Yeah, that'd be great.
Cool, excellent.
Thanks for having us.
Please help me thank our guests.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a great rest of your FunkCon.